Hello there! Greetings Internet, Revan619 here. For my returning subscribers, welcome back. It's glad to see you on a Dark Souls video. And for anyone new, I am someone who likes to make Dark Souls content and some various other poopy posts as I go along through it. So what I'm going to be talking about today, in today's video, is my top builds for 2018. Now, Dark Souls is no longer receiving updates, so what's going to be true now is going to be true next year and in futures to come. As Dark Souls is still being played and it's still popular in a lot of new fighting games, I think last time I checked it had 5 times the player size of Soul Calibur, and Dark Souls is a 2-year-old game. I thought I'd run down what I think are the top builds at the moment, and maybe give some shout to some interesting and unique builds whilst I'm at it. As always, a lot of this is opinion, experience, tournament data, duel experience, fight club, streams, and just looking at some of the hard and fast truths of stuff like speed of weapons, damage, recovery, tracking, and all that good little nitty gritty nerdy stuff. If you want to see something a little bit more detailed, let me know and maybe we can work on that. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run down what I think are the top builds, and then maybe we'll give out some shouts, some honourable mentions. Okay, to start off, we are going to look at one of the most diverse and probably the best all-round build in the game, which is Dark Builds. Now, Dark Builds are the new quality builds. For those of you who aren't aware, the infusions got buffed and quality infusion got nerfed. Dark came out as the new king of that because it is just absolutely fantastic, and it does some of the most damage to a lot of builds because not many people have ridiculous amounts of faith. So it's also very good for chipping shields, which is why it became the new meta, because shields can make any physical weapon almost useless to the point that the only way you can damage is by whiff punishing or if the other opponent makes a mistake, whereas Dark Builds, they can chip. And thanks to Dark Builds, some other things became very popular, which were crossbows. Crossbows before couldn't really deal with a shield, but once you're able to chip the shield, you have an amazing range punish tool, a harassment tool at range, and if they try to close the gap, you've got a way to chip through their shield. So it's very good with a quick weapon that can back that up, and Dark Infuse something like a straight sword or a dagger is just absolutely beautiful. Now, the different sorts of Dark Builds you have are your Dex and your Strength variants. Normally, the Dex variant, you'll have 18 Strength with 30 Dexterity, 30 Intelligence, 30 Brave. The Strength version, you'll kind of flip that where you don't really need to invest into Dexterity unless it's to meet minimum requirements or something, and you'll go for Strength. The Dex side gets most of the good straight swords like the Lothric Knight Sword, the Gotthard Twin Swords, whereas Strength gets the axes, and there are some Poise weapons that you can use in there. Now, myself, I like to run a shield version, which means I use 40 endurance, so I can use a shield, crossbow, straight sword, daggers, perseverance spam with an Castus, and regen, because it's a melee build, so it's absolutely fantastic for that. Some people don't like to go for a shield, and they like to go, say, runaway crossbow, which is you try to use most of your damage with the crossbow, and you just run away. Against nearly any build besides a shield build or a dagger build, this is incredibly effective, because the crossbow can safely fire and avoid nearly every weapon in the game, besides some really good fast weapons like the Murky hand Scythe and a few other little notable examples. These can actually benefit from only running 26 endurance, which is a very low one, which means that they can invest into other things. Another variant on the strength side of things, if you're not planning to use a shield, is running 26 endurance, so you can pump up that vitality so you can actually play a passive Poise build. The idea with this is you're going to go for trades and you're going to be playing really defensively. Again, same way with the crossbow, but you've got a way to do some bigger damage a little bit faster. Now, some good notable standouts on it, like I said, Lothric Knight Sword, the Arbalist. You can even run light crossbow if you're going for a Black Knight shield, which is of course one of the best shields in the game. You've got the twin axes, which work very well on this, the Murky hand Scythe, the Dark Harp. A Dark Infused Harp is the exact same length as a Dark Murky hand Scythe and will actually out damage it, whereas Murky hand Scythe, a Chaos Infused one, didn't receive the same nerf that a Dark Murky hand Scythe did, but it's triple split, so the damage isn't always best. It's also dependent on the build you're going up against. If it's a strength build, you're going to want to use a Dark Harp. If it's anything else, probably a Chaos Infused Murky hand Scythe. So this is, like I said, one of the most diverse builds. You can put great swords on there, you can put an ultra great sword, you can use an infused spear, infused axes, infused curved swords, infused straight swords. Basically, the most common and popular build in the game. I did a video on this back when they first launched and they got very popular. At first only like the real tryhards knew about this, but as soon as the videos went up of tournaments for it, I made my video on Dark Builds. It got very popular very fast in the old channel, and it's now what you see everyone using. And to mention, a lot of the Invader streamers picked up on it because of the Chaos Hornet Ring infusion, or it's same with Dark really. It just does a lot of damage, and it is absolutely The next top build that I want to talk about is the Demon Scar build. Now the variant that I made popular back on the first day of launch of DLC, which got a few 100,000 views, which is why anyone who plays Demon Scar always gets accused of copying my builds, even if they have different stats and setups, is using Prisoner's Chain with Sacred Tree Bellvine, so you don't need to use Sage's Ring +2, and you use the Demon Scars with only 3 spells, and those spells are Black Flame, Fire Surge, and Chaos Bed Vestiges. Now a lot of people used to argue that Great Chaos Fire Orb was better, and before the Chaos Bed Vestiges got buffed, it probably was, because free aiming of it, you could use it to set up a few things. But some spells that used to be able to combo into Great Chaos Fire Orb, like Fire Whip, which you used to be able to free aim yourself, and if you caught someone with it, you could turn it as you were casting. You could then true combo into a Great Chaos Fire Orb, or even set up their roll for where they were going to go if they were too far away, which was very effective, but unfortunately, with the nerfs that happened to some Pyromancy Builds, it's not as good. Some people like Black Serpent, but honestly, its tracking is so bad, even with the menu open, you can very easily sidestep it, and a lot of the other Pyromancies aren't exactly great for 1v1. Floating Chaos can be react at mid-range punished by Chaos Bed Vestiges, so in a caster versus caster, if I see someone using Floating Chaos, I can react and throw Chaos Bed Vestiges at them and stop the cast before it even goes off, so they don't even get to really damage me, but they've wasted the FP. Alternatively, crossbows can punish the hell out of it. So the best way to play the Demon Scar build is you optimize your stats so that you just have those 4 spells, so anything from 24 attunement is great. Then you can put some points into Vigor, and you put them into Endurance, and you can use the Demon Scar, which allows this caster to play a very effective melee character. And because of this, it's the reason that Pyromancy is the best of the casting schools, because they can play melee, they can play ranged punish, and they can set up some burst damage, because the Demon Scar R1 true combos into Black Flame. You can then set up other pseudo combos such as the Weapon Art, which you can then combo again into a Black Flame if someone tries to parry you after the Black Flame. And there are some people who do think that if you invest a few more points from 16 to 18 in dexterity, you can then also use a Lothric Knight Sword in the offhand, which gives you a little bit more range, because the Demon Scar and the Scimitar are actually the same length as the Broken Straight Sword, which with Fire Surge, that doesn't matter at all, because that is an amazing harassment tool, and if you use it well, it's virtually unpunishable. You have to predict the cast to be able to punish it. Also, Demon Scar can do something called spell cancelling to cancel its recovery on its R1s. So say you miss an R1, and your opponent then goes to R1 punish you, if you start casting a spell then immediately roll, you actually cancel the recovery of your R1, which makes you incredibly hard to punish. However, this is something very difficult to use in battles, and it's not going to be something common that you see. But with the burst damage and the utility of the spells, and the fact that you can then throw an offhand like Dark Murky Hand Scythe to deal Black Knight Shield, or a Chaos Murky Hand Scythe to just deal some more damage, or even better yet, Dark Harp will actually outdamage the Dark Murky Hand Scythe, same length, same weapon art, so it's pretty usable. Overall, this is my favourite build. It's the one that I've made popular, and it's the one that if anyone uses it, they get accused of copying me, even if they've never heard of me. But it's still one of the top builds, it's won tournaments, and it's definitely my favourite, one of the most enjoyables to play. The third build that I want to directly talk about, which is one of the top ones out there, is the Pontiff Knight Curved Sword physical build. Now this one, you mostly aim to have 40 endurance, and because Pontiff Knight Curved Sword kind of reaches its two-handed cap at 26 strength, going over that gives quite diminishing returns. At 32 it really starts to drop off. But there are some good little build variants that you can do with it. You can stop at 26 or 32 and then pump things elsewhere, but if you go up to 35, you can actually then hard swap from the Pontiff Knight Curved Sword to the Ring Knight Straight Sword and a Black Knight Shield to be able to then also use some hyper armor trades. So if you're fighting someone who's using a crossbow, for instance, you can then set up the shield to try and block the crossbow and then go to some hyper armor trades. Again, this isn't a perfect strategy because, as with all things, the crossbow build is likely going to have a dark weapon and that can chip through your shield, and if you miss the Ring Knight Straight Sword weapon art, it is incredibly easy to punish. It all comes down to your own mind games. One of the popular things to use with Pontiff Knight Curved Sword is also a Caestus, so you can use the Perseverance to give yourself 5 seconds of infinite poise to run down and then roll catch people trying to escape you. Now, the Pontiff Knight Curved Sword is actually shorter than a longsword, but because of its speed, it can actually roll catch much better than most straight swords because it just goes off so quickly. It feels like it has longer roll catch speed than it actually does, but it's a very good weapon. In my opinion, better than Dark Scimitar, because the Dark Scimitar is actually the same length as the Broken Straight Sword, and again, you can also use other backups for it because it is a mostly dex focused weapon. So you can use stuff like the Mailbreaker to try and trick people into going for a roll and spamming the weapon out tool combos into 2 of them. You can use a Murky Hand Scythe sharp with a Pine Rhythm, which is again very damaging, and Murky Hand Scythe is one of the best daggers in the game, seeing as the harp. But in this scenario with the Pine Rhythm, it out damages the harp, so Murky Hand Scythe is going to be the one you want to go for. And because you don't need to go to a 40-40 build, you can still invest points into Faith to get stuff like Tears of Denial, or you can put an extra carry weight so you can have a shield, or you could have a crossbow. A lot of people will like to go for crossbow, Murky Hand Scythe, Pontiff Knight Curve Sword, and a Castus, and then you can even use a Sacred Chime of Villanor, so you have regen. This is without a doubt one of the strongest builds in the game because curved swords have the best two-handed moveset in the game. Straight swords might have the best one-handed moveset, but they are beaten hands down by Pontiff Knight Curve Sword. A lot of people say that rapiers are a good option, but they're just not as effective. A rapier on an R1 can actually be circle backstabbed if you know it's coming. It doesn't track as well, so it doesn't roll catch as easier. And yes, it is fast, but it has more recovery than a straight sword on R1, so it's actually easier to whiff punish, and it's not exactly the longest weapon in the game. Some people also like to use spears, but again, spear tracking, you can beat a spear just by constantly rolling into them because they don't have the speed to just R1 spam to catch things like a curved sword rapier and even a straight sword has. So this makes this one of the best builds in the game, and it's probably the build that most tryhards will actually focus to because of how good it is at roll catching. Yes, a shield can stop it down, but because it's so quick, it can punish rolls and R1 whiffs incredibly well, which almost takes the shield out of the equation. It doesn't fully do it, and some of the top Pontiff Knight Curve Sword players will actually argue they think the shield build is better, but the Pontiff Knight Curve Sword's aggression just suits their playstyle more. Now, for you PvP kings out there, those 3 builds are going to be something very common that you might know, but you have to remember that there is a lot of new people coming into the Dark Souls community who are following people that still PvP focus, are exploding with their channels, that they're not the best at PvP themselves, so there's a lot of misinformation that's put out there. Like, for instance, a lot of people still don't know that red soap sign phantoms don't have reduced health, and they actually have full health the same as the host, which is probably, if that was more common knowledge, we might see some more fight clubs and people saying that it's evasions or the arena only. But there are some non-top of the meta builds I want to talk about that are also very powerful, and a lot of you tryhards, again, you'll know this, but for some of the players who won't, this is for their benefit. Now, one of my favourite builds is what I refer to as a running Homing Soul Mass, which is basically any effective sorcery build. What they do is they set up Homing Soul Mass because it's an incredibly fast spell and it's very hard to punish, and then they run away until they can set you up to catch you with it. One of the things they like to do is roll into you as you go for an R1, so they roll for your hit and you get hit by their Homing Soul Mass, or they like to turn and fire the Homing Soul Mass. As you're trying to avoid it, they then free aim something like Fire and Hail to catch you on these rolls, or they'll run in with a quick weapon like a straight sword or a rapier, catch a roll, and then start setting up some damage. Now, there are some good spells that can go on it, like Soul Greatsword, which can be useful for catching rolls of people trying to avoid Homing Soul Mass. Baron Flash Sword can combo very well on weapons that don't have the best tracking, such as the rapiers, because if you try to avoid the rapier R1, they can catch a roll with the Baron Flash Sword, and vice versa. If they go for something like a Great Farron Dart that can shoot at you, if you try to avoid that on a roll, then they can catch you with the rapier. So there are some good combinations. I also am very fond of the Hazel Pick build, which can use that, which becomes essentially a slower version of the Demon Scar build with a bit of poise and hyper armor. Another one of the builds, Lightning Arrow builds. Now, the Dragon Slayer axe has the exact same length as the longsword, which can actually be used on the Blessed build, so it makes for a very good regen weapon that you can then use with the regular Talisman, which has more spell buff than the Canvas Talisman and only slightly less poise, so it won't ever matter because you're not really going to be training with an Ultra Greatsword anyway, and it's quite effective. The reason it's never going to be on the top of the builds is the Lothric Knight's Shield, when Lightning Infused, has something like 95 lightning resistance and just completely nullifies the build. Another fun little one, double crossbow build. You can actually just invest all your points into vitality, put some into health and then some into endurance, and at 125 you can then fast roll in full heavy armor with an arbalist and a light crossbow, or a knight's crossbow for if people are using shields, and then that way you can set them up, try and do the main damage with your arbalist, and then also punching people trying to punish the reload with a light crossbow. Other little tools that are good, a bit of rope firebombs, really setting up to avoid you. Another great one, Offhand Yawns. Offhand Yawns is something that was been around since launch and is very common, or you can also infuse the Great Machete. Basically, in the offhand, Yorm's is slightly longer, same with Great Machete, and they have a lot of poise. So you can use that to set up trades. You can then put in your right hand something like an axe or a straight sword or a rapier, whatever have you, depending on where you're going with your build, and you can set up some big damaging, and the great axes will actually two-hit combo when one-handed. However, when two-handed it can't, but they have a lot of damage. Not as much as a lot of things since the DLCs came out, but it's still an incredibly fun build. This next one can be run on the Pontiff Knight Curve Sword build as a quick hard swap, but that is the Valahar. Valahar is one of those really amazing little weapons that if you can set up the trades well, you essentially have a Poise straight sword. Very decent for trades. It's got a lot of damage that you can do with Leo Ring, and when you're on low with Red Tearstone and Morion, if you can survive like that jumping R2, which is unique to the Valahar, and you get thrust damage. I've seen people do up to 800 to 900 in a single hit, which is just fantastic. Just want to throw a quick shout out to very high dex builds. There are some builds out there that if you get up to like 70 dex, that are absolute monsters. A couple of these weapons that can be used with that are something like the Lothric Knight Straight Sword, you've got things like the S-Stock, you've got weapons like the Corvian Great Scythe, and you can use them with stuff like Dragon Head, crossbows and shields just as before. Last but not least, worth mentioning are Glass Cannon buff builds. These are weapons where you normally go up to about 40 dexterity with something that's got a high dex scaling, say for Sharp, which could be Lothric Knight's Sword, or even Murky Hand Scythe, and then you go 60 faith, you drop your endurance down a little bit so you don't exactly have the highest, and then you apply, say to Murky Hand Scythe, the Darkblade buff, or say to a Lothric Knight's Sword, you then throw on Dark Moonblade, and for 60 seconds, 90 seconds if you throw on Lingering Dragon Crest Ring 2, you have an incredibly powerful weapon. Now, like I've said before in the past, old greatswords aren't exactly the best. By objective standpoints, they're the worst weapon for PvP because they perform the worst. Doesn't mean you can't win with them, doesn't mean you don't win with them. What it means is in a direct comparison to the other classes, they're not the best. But much like Ultra Greatswords, if you can just hit someone 3 times because no one's perfect, you're going to do a lot of damage. So on these high buff builds, you can have a Murky Hand Scythe that has more damage than a normal Dark Infused Lothric Knight Sword, or even a Lothric Knight Sword that's doing Ultra Greatsword damage. So you can be 3 and 4 shotting people, and it is absolutely ridiculous. You can stack them with other things like the Mask and the Crown of Dust, which can increase magic or dark damage, so you can throw an extra 5% more. But these things are very high damaging. That's it, everyone. Those are the top builds. Again, just using a top build does not guarantee a win. It just means from an objective standpoint, you're more likely to win. Skill does matter, and so do mind games. Some of an Ultra Greatsword who's just a better player is still going to beat someone using a Pontiff Knight Curve Sword if they can force the panic roll and roll catch them. And there are always little side weapons that you can use to improve it, such as an Ultra Greatsword benefits from a dagger in the offhand or a rapier, because it's fast enough to benefit, force a roll, and then to roll catch. Same way you use the Mailbreaker. Force a roll with the R1 and then you roll catch with the weapon up. But that's it. Let me know below if you have anything that you'd like to add. It's always good to get a discussion. Leave the video a like if you enjoyed it. Share it to any people who might be interested in knowing about some of the builds and stuff. And of course the footage in the background was just various clips of me playing it. I will link below loads of different builds I've used this. I've got loads of them on my channel for you guys to go back and binge watch as much as you want. Also, been uploading some Soul Calibur content. Lots of fun there. I've unlisted most of them because they don't get many views because I'm not a channel focused on it, and that does hurt the channel. But if you check my playlist, you can check them out. Till next time, I'll see you again, and we've got another big Dark Souls video maybe coming up in the early new year. Till then, Revan out. Goodbye.